Hi, in today's episode of the MarTech Memo, I'm sitting down with Franklin Rios. Franklin is the CEO of NextNet, and the conversation we're talking about is something that every brand needs to be paying attention to right now, and that is how AI is completely reshaping the way your business gets discovered. LLMs are pulling from everywhere and making recommendations and serving up answers about your brand, and most companies have no idea how they're being represented. Franklin breaks down why content needs to stop being treated as a marketing tactic and start being treated as infrastructure in the age of geo and AEO. Hi, welcome to the MarTech Memo, where we go beyond the surface level discussions and marketing hype with MarTech and SaaS thought leaders. And today I'm so excited. I'm joined by Franklin Rios, the CEO of NextNet. NextNet is an AI-powered discoverability platform that helps brands show up in answers, recommendations, and next-gen search, not just ads, so they stay visible and win customers in the era. Thanks so much, Franklin, for joining me today. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, this is such a great topic now today. I'm having these conversations every day with customers and people I speak with because I think that a lot of brands don't realize really what all the LLMs are, how they're affecting their business and how they're coming up from a search standpoint and discoverability standpoint. Because the LLMs now, it's a whole different model in terms of how consumers and how B2B players are actually researching their products and features and whatever it is that they're looking for. So, I think along those lines, I'd love just to dive in. I'm really excited for the conversation. So, and again, I really love NextNet's approach to AI and SEO. Could you walk me through a little bit of your journey to NextNet and the AI discoverability problem, which we just kind of touched on?
Yeah, certainly. And look, the journey has been one of transformation and evolution, right? My career started in data, all things data. So by nature, I'm a data geek. I love data. And to my luck, data is still a very relevant part of everything that is going on.
Even
You
more
know,
so now, right?
even more so, exactly, because if you don't want to, if you want a model to hallucinate, let them make up their own data, right? If you want a model to come back with high fidelity answers and high fidelity responses, data is the center of gravity for all of that. And then that evolution then went into the world of early days of RTV, programmatic, ad tech, MarTech, and that led me to almost come full circle to NextNet, where NextNet as a tradition has been a company that specialized in managed services SEO, all things backlinks, organic, et cetera, by partnering with publishers to publish content in order to be part of the rankings in Google. And when I first joined NextNet, the first question that I asked the founder, who's still in business, Hargrove, was like, where do you want to take this business? What are you encountering? And we all knew that AI was already in the picture. This conversation happened in mid 2020, and we already knew that there was a disruption, a positive disruption, by OpenAI and ChatGPT and everything else becoming more available to the public and being released to the wild. And so the scenario was one of, okay, do we want to do a technical SEO LLMs.txt type of scenario? Or do we want to leapfrog what's out there and think ahead in a way that is not just beyond what we need to provide, but think ahead in a way that is transformational again, right? And so we almost had to create a SWAT team in the company in order to think like a startup. Like, let's get an entrepreneurial muscle going in the company with the 20 years of knowledge that we have, the intellectual property and people, because I'm proud to say that a lot of people at NextNet have been in the company at least an average of 9 years.
Wow, so that's amazing.
Again, it's Mark's, culture and the legacy that he built in the company, which is so strong and very well rooted in client in delight and delivering and doing things. And what happened with that was then, with that knowledge, then we had to combine it with external, new, fresh thinking that had zero, call it, bias of what the company did as a business today and how the company became profitable and how the company became sustainable and scalable, and think about what the world is heading towards tomorrow. So that was, call it, how it got me to this part of the journey.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, I think you took the right approach because I think the saying is if you don't disrupt your business, somebody else will. And you have to really think, like, I think to your point, like, how do we take that next leap forward as opposed to, okay, what's happening today, but how do we future proof what we're doing, go so far ahead of it? Because if we don't do that, somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I must give credit to Steve Jobs, because that's what he did at Apple. He said, I'm going to have my Mac team continue to do Mac, but then I needed to create Apple,
Right.
right? All things that started with AI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the thought process that I had in the company. It was like, guys, we're still the same company, but we need to have that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And involve with a brand new set of tools.
Yeah. Well, and even since you guys started on that journey in 2024, it has changed like exponentially since then.
Yes.
And what you're doing right now is so important. And I think is really, well, maybe on the top of a lot of marketers' minds in terms of how they're being presented. I don't think that they really understand like how quickly they need to really deploy what NextNet is doing, because they're going to get left behind really quick.
It is true, because even back in the early days of search and organic and all that, companies still had time to sort it out and test things and to see, okay, do I really want to jump into this Google world of organic rankings and all that? And even when companies that came late into the fold, they could still catch up. They could still
Right. Yeah.
get there. But with what's happening today with LLMs, what's happening today with vectorizing, embedding, and native language of AI, there's no catching up. There's
No.
now.
Yeah, exactly. So, along those lines, like, what are you seeing right now that most SaaS MarTech leaders still misunderstand about AI and search and just brand marketers in general?
Yeah. So the first thing is the conversations we have with clients. So I call it 3 constituents of clients.
Okay.
The traditional client the NextNet has had has been the SMB, the independent business owner at a hyper local level market, right? An HVAC company, a plumber, a roofer, etc. The second constituents of clients that we have are your resellers, the agencies, the ones that are providing services to clients that we white label our services through. And then the third, which is the most recent constituencies because of the platform that we developed, is the enterprise grade. How do we do this for compliance effects for pharma? How do we do this for QSR and CPG at a hyper local level? And so the first is that brands need to know how they're being represented in AI systems. And there are multiple platforms that can give you directional dashboards and reporting of those things. That's okay. Second, the publishers also need a way to protect attribution, because the zero-click environment's not here. It's already passed, actually. It's already taken its effect, and it's going to continue to eradicate the clicking effect. And ensure that the content is actually being reused and not misinterpreted.
Right.
Because what happens with the LLMs is that they almost take a paella of opinions, information, scraping, and content and serve it up as the answer. And sometimes that paella might not have the most important ingredient, which is the saffron. And so, but the saffron is what is the critical data components that make that response, that answer to the consumer, a high fidelity answer, and not one that is directional, but one that is empirical. Because when the LLMs are using third-party content outside of the publisher or the brand's native content, then it creates a situation where interpretation is taking place.
Right.
And I'm not talking about a hallucination. A hallucination is the extreme example of that, but an interpretation. Because an interpretation can be taken from content that the LLMs grab from a Redweek, right? And all those places where there is human comments being put into consideration. But from Reddit, I meant Reddit, not Redweek. I'm on the board of a company called Redweek. That's where that Freudian slip came from. And then it also from a Reddit, which is, consumer related content. It's opinions, and those opinions are valid, and those opinions are, for the most part, one like to think that are factual but they're sentimental. But nonetheless, it is not a representation of the brand. And so that's a challenge. The way that we see is that our role is to make that content machine ready first. The role, the content that is either at the local plumber or at the enterprise grade level of a Pfizer, Novo Nordisk, etc. So what we do is that then we help those brands expose their information in a structured, vector native, and verifiable way, which is the way that the AI systems actually operate internally. So we're speaking the natural language of the AI systems. Instead of the AI systems having to come in, scrape it, then translate it, create a Rosetta Stone, and then interpret it in a data element, we are already doing that. So instead of relying on HTML that a crawler has to interpret. We publish clean embeddings, structured data, signing keys that models can trust from the onset. So therefore, there is zero interpretation or paella making ingredients that need to take place. It's already served up with high fidelity, high trusted.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important because what I think has changed so much now from a search standpoint, right? As a consumer, whether it's B2B or looking for an HVAC company, is that those LLMs, as you said, are combining all different kinds of information and providing that feedback. So when you're asking a question now, through an LLM, it's not just here are the top players based on Google search or organic along those lines or what they're paying from an SEM standpoint. It's SEO standpoint, it is like, okay, now I'm taking all the information that exists out there that the LLMs are going to go, and now it's giving me opinions. It's giving me, good and bad reviews. It's giving me, recommendations, pros and cons, which is maybe not what I asked, but I just asked a simple question, but it's compiling all that information. So if you're not set up properly to make sure that you're showing up and the fidelity is there could be issues in terms of where you show up from a search standpoint along those lines.
It is. And unfortunately, I would say another issue that is starting to percolate and is starting to manifest itself is with the bad actors in the industry.
Right.
That there was a recent case earlier this year where a person asked one of the agents the number for served up as the answer by the LLM. That person and that person and multiple others end up calling that number as being the source of customer service, and their private information was stolen because that was a bad actor that created a ton of content in order to influence the LLMs to take it as gospel and to take it as the real source of the content in order to misrepresent that credit card company.
Fraud is prevalent.
Dangerous.
It's very dangerous. Yes. And I think what that illustrates is just how prevalent fraud exists and will continue to be taken advantage of in these new systems, certainly with AI, and how much more important it is what NextNet is doing to make sure that those types of issues don't pop up, right?
Exactly. Because our error scoring then creates a high trust of relevancy and a high trust of verifying that the information is coming from the intended source.
Yeah.
So, the drift factor is how far is the brand or the publisher or the whoever away from the answer. That's one thing. That's just a score of how far close or away you are from the center of gravity. But the most important one is where is the trust and that is verifiable and is coming from the intended source. Source.
That trust factor. Super important. Yeah. No, absolutely. And look, I mean, you've got a tremendous career. And when you think back about your time, like leading big P&Ls and transformations, like what's the, one go-to-market mistake you see everywhere?
Vaporware.
Okay. Yep.
Over companies that are, especially in the spot that I am right now, a lot of companies raising a lot of money, VC money, selling a lot of promises and quite a bit of jazz hands out in vaporware.
Yeah. Okay.
It creates a lot of noise. And it also is a disservice to the industry because a lot of this is going to have to be weeded out and cleaned up so that the serious, formal, disciplined players that are truly trying to create a solution and an answer to the ecosystem can truly rise up and take hold. And I see the same thing happen in the early days of RTV and programmatic.
Right.
Where there were a lot of companies out there that were doing it, in their own way. And some of them were doing things like buying inventory and reselling, doing arbitrage or what have you, zero transparency, some transparency, a lot of fraud, no fraud. And again, and that had to work itself out, but it took years. And I don't think
it's still a problem too. It still is an issue.
Yes, exactly. It's still an issue. But however, in this day and age, with the LLMs that are present out there, the major ones, I'm talking about Gemini, Claude, etc. That's going to have to work itself out faster because there's going to be situations where this information is going to be misused or the information is going to be misinterpreted.
Yeah. And I think, again, as we touched on when we kicked off, is that the speed to which everything is happening right now is just so fast that you're already behind if you haven't even been thinking about how you're going to, attack those issues. A, but B is like, you have to be more nimble as an organization to make sure that you're deploying these tactics on, to make sure that you're not susceptible to all those problems.
Yeah, and there needs to be a paradigm shift in the way that companies treat their content as a marketing tactic
Mhm.
instead of an infrastructural
Yeah, that's a good point.
foundational component to it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And along those lines, where do you think teams should actually start? It actually like segued right into our question. My next question is like, where do you think that teams should actually start if they want to bring AI and what NextNet is doing, to make sure that that infrastructure is set up properly? Like, what is like the top three things that they should be thinking about?
The first thing is, how is my content being interpreted by the LLMs? And that you can get, like I said, some of it through off-the-shelf reporting and applications that exist. That's okay. That is, you can get almost anywhere right now. The most important thing is, how can you get direction with a mathematical certainty, right? Using physics, not using probabilities, not using sample data, not using synthetic data, not using panel data, but truly using mathematical models that are backed by physics that say, if you do this to your content, A, B, and C, you will get a result of X, Y, and Z. That is something that has to be that every person that is managing content, whether you're a marketer or you are in compliance or you are in merchandising or retail or e-commerce, you have got to start with that component, which is, how am I being perceived?
Mhm.
How is this being perceived versus what are the elements that need to be done in order to improve and accelerate that? And what is the attribution, the mathematical?
And
last,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, and last but not least, to have that same tool execute on those recommendations, not just give you a 3-inch binder saying you should do all of this and let me know how it goes.
Exactly. And what I was going to jump in and say is like, how often now, yeah, I don't think it's, we're way past set it and forget it. How often should brands be considering that? How often should they be looking at making sure that all their content is showing up properly and that they're doing the right things?
That it depends on the brand, right? So again, I'm going to go back to the three constituencies that I
Mhm.
referred to earlier. If you're an SMB, you should be doing that monthly, just to make sure that there's good cadence,
Mhm.
good housekeeping, and that you are properly being represented at your local market level, right? At your neighborhood level, at your 3, 5, 10, 20-mile radius of your trading area. If you are an agency helping a client with more locations, with multi-locations and multi-everything, that needs to happen weekly. And if you're an enterprise grade brand, that needs to be happening real time.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it has to be, because especially in the world of e-commerce, QSR, CPG, and pharma, and financial services, that has to be real time, because
Yeah.
there's so
Yeah.
much that is happening real time.
Right. And from a competitive set as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why when we presented this to NVIDIA, they understood and they liked it, because they know that this requires GPUs to execute.
Right. Yeah.
If we
For
were
sure.
to use CPUs for the third use case
Mhm.
that I mentioned, which is real time, it would
Yeah.
take weeks upon weeks to get to somewhere.
Yeah.
We're using the GPUs, it takes us minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. No, you're right. And I think that, there's always been a concern from a usage standpoint. Like, so we had a cloud business a while ago, and one of the challenges was always like, we had hundreds, but it was overkill for what a lot of customers were needing. And now it's table stakes, right? GPUs are table stakes. So for our audience, what's one practical way to make their brand more findable in an AI driven world this quarter? Right? Not like in the future, but like, what should they be doing today to make sure that they're properly set up and to your point, discoverable and that they're think of it from any of those three constituents. We were just talking about enterprise. So from an enterprise standpoint, what do you really see as the one practical way for them to make themselves more findable?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier before, Marty, is to not create the content as a tactic, but use it as an infrastructure.
Mhm.
So what are the components of the infrastructure within the content that already exist that can be repurposed in a good narrative, right? In a good storytelling narrative that is empirical, that is true, that is high fidelity because it's coming from the brand, not coming from in a way that then can be published and it can be put out there for the LLMs to grab it and to source it with a trust factor. That would be the
Got it.
first step. Start with the content that is proprietary and that is native to the brand.
Yeah, that makes sense, because otherwise you're just going to get a lot of AI slop, I would imagine, right? And hallucinations and not the right info.
And what ifs?
Yeah. What are, like, as you look for, let's not go too far out because I think it's changing so fast. I was originally going to ask you for 2 years. I think it's it's a little too far out, but like, what are the two of the biggest changes you'll see within the next year, let's say, with the vast acceleration of AI? I mean, if you look back from, when you guys decided that you were going to make that leap to really reevaluate what you were doing and leapfrog what was happening, what do you see in the next year of two of the biggest changes?
So several things. So on one end, as you know, OpenAI has opened the gates for advertising inside of ChatGPT with a minimum spend of $200,000. I am certain that a lot of the large holdcos are going to come in and test it out and to tip their toe and sort it out. Where does that leave the mid-market and everyone else, right? And it doesn't create room for anyone. And most importantly, how do you measure attribute? How do you measure results out of something like that? So that's going to have to get sorted out. The second thing that I see happening is at the mid-market and SMB level is an agent-to-agent connectivity,
Right. Yeah.
right? Which is going to be very important. And again, the trust factor comes into play in that. Where if I am searching for a plumber or searching for need an agent-to-agent conversation, right, between the brand that I am asking the question to and the representations that are being made in the AI world. Or if it's something as simple as I found a plumber and I would like to make an appointment, I don't want to go outside of that conversation that I'm having with that particular agent to set up the appointment. Well, I want the agent to serve me up the options of the appointment and for me to be able to take action. The other change, so that agent to agent is a big milestone that is coming.
That's a huge, yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
The third one is, how does the new version of a data clean room manifest itself amongst companies? Clean rooms are the scenarios where companies are sharing data with one another or merging or doing data appending or enrichment in a safe harbor environment. But how does that happen in the MCP world, right? At the enterprise grade. What I mean by that is, if you think about a CRM company, a large CRM company, without names being mentioned, that CRM company wants to be the source of truth or the record keeper of the client information. But if you try to bring an agent outside of that, an MCP agent outside of that, it is virtually impossible that those companies do not want to provide access into the CRM data, even though the data belongs to you, the customer, right? So we're going to see a scenario where enterprises and companies are going to start saying, "Wait a minute, it is my data. You're not letting me bring my own agents into my data in order to interrogate it in the way that I want to use it and to connect to it in other ways. So why are you treating me as a wall guard? Are you treating your product as a wall guard?" This is because these types of companies are trying to create their own AI agents and their own AI tools and agents to start to upcharge for the use of your own data, right? And so to continue to try to control the environment. So a big change that I see occurring is for enterprise-grade companies starting pounding the table and demanding for these types of companies to be more open, or else they're going to have to find different ways of handling their data.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you for sharing those. I thought that those were spot on, by the way. I couldn't agree with you more on those, because I think that those are the three big areas that I think are going to dramatically change. And I think, also to your point, at the SMB and enterprise level, but more so even on the SMB, like think about it from a e-commerce standpoint now, where you've got, agents going out for consumers and doing shopping. Right. I just read somewhere that Perplexity isn't allowed. I think it was Amazon, I think, is no longer allowing Perplexity AI to go out and actually search and shop on Amazon. I mean, that's the way the world is going. It, kind of to your point, it's just the way it's going to be, and they're going to have to figure that out. So, even from a consumer standpoint.
Yeah. And last but not least, at some point, there's going to have to be legislation out there that creates the rules of the road. Okay. What is the social capital contract between the consumer and the AI world in general?
Yeah.
Right. And I hope that the industry start some form of self-regulation and rules of the road on its own, instead of having government. Because if it's the latter, it's going to be not well thought out, to be honest with you, and it's going to be incomplete, and it's not going to be agile enough to adapt to the rapid changes that are happening in the industry.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point as well. And we certainly in the news that there have been some recent issues in terms of how that, what that looks like. So listen, Franklin, thank you so much for your time today and great thoughts and great insights. Really appreciate your time and no, absolutely. We also talk about what's happening next in the space and really hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I really enjoyed the conversation with Franklin. Thanks for joining us today.